Way back in 1733, the Molasses Act said that merchants in the colonies who were importing or bringing in sugar products like molasses into the American colonies had to pay a tax of 6 pence. Colonial merchants simply avoided paying this tax by smuggling it or sneaking it in right under the noses of British authorities who weren't really trying to catch them in the first place. However, immediately after the French and Indian War in 1764, British Parliament decided to make some tweaks, revisions, modifications, alterations, changes to that old unenforced Molasses Act. What change, you're wondering? The British decided to change the amount of taxes paid on sugar products entering the colonies from 6 pence to, are you ready for this? 3 pence. War! How could they do such a thing? Wait a minute. Did you say they lowered the tax? Yep, lowered it. Instead, the British decided they would actually enforce the payment of the tax. They'd crack down on those who were smuggling or sneaking sugar products into the colonies and make them actually pay. While Great Britain was at war with France during the French and Indian War, the number of British soldiers living in the 13 colonies increased. Just where did all these British soldiers rest their heads at night? British colonists opened up their inns, taverns, horse stables, even their homes to soldiers who were there to stamp out their French enemies to the west. After the French were defeated in the French and Indian War, many of these soldiers remained in the 13 colonies to make sure that western border was secure. We can't have the French trying to come back now, can we? Soon, some colonists grew tired of providing these British soldiers with quarters or rooms to stay. So the British Parliament passed the Declaratory Act of 1764. War! How could they do such a thing? No. The British government actually decided to help ease the crowding. This new law simply said that colonial legislatures, the groups who made laws for the colonies, would have to figure out a way to quarter or house the soldiers. The cost of building housing for the soldiers would be in the hands of the colonies where the soldiers were living, not the British government an ocean away. You mean the Declaratory Act of 1764 did not force colonists to let soldiers into their homes? Nope, it sure didn't. That law was 10 years away. So far, none of these acts or laws had done much to raise revenue or bring in money so Britain could pay off its post-war debt. Right, remember that after the French and Indian War, Great Britain, the heavyweight champion of all European empires, was broke as a joke. To raise revenue, Parliament passed the Stamp Act. This was a new tax on printed paper, mainly legal documents, newspapers, playing cards, and even dice. Printed paper required a stamp to show the penny or less tax had been paid. After passing the Stamp Act, Parliament moved on to taking care of more important matters facing Great Britain. Let's place ourselves in the shoes of Great Britain for a moment, shall we? The 13 colonies by the mid-1700s were rich and getting richer. We know this because of the big money colonists were spending on British goods like fancy clothing, fabrics, hats, wigs, elegant teapots. The numbers of colonists continued to increase by leaps and bounds, and the average household income was greater than families living in Great Britain. These same colonists also benefited by having the French not around anymore. And the colonists living in the 13 colonies were paying very lightweight taxes when compared to the people living in Great Britain. The average British citizen who lived in Great Britain paid 26 shillings per year in taxes. Compare that to the 1 shilling per year paid by colonists living in New England. Did I mention that many colonists were becoming wealthy? And they were very proud to be known as British subjects. What trouble could a halfpenny tax cause? I mean, I don't care what century you're in, a halfpenny is a halfpenny, not exactly an economic backbreaker. Since taxing the 13 colonies wasn't really anything new, Hat Act of 1732, Molasses Act of 1733, the Iron Act of 1750, I mean, the Stamp Act was nothing to stamp your feet about or lose any sleep over, right? It took 6 weeks for the news of the new tax on printed paper to reach the colonies, and when it did, war! How could they do such a thing? No, nothing like that. More like, meeting! Let's have a meeting! The Stamp Act Congress met in New York City. The Stamp Act Congress was made up of delegates or representatives representing 9 of the 13 colonies, and they met to declare war! How could they do such a thing? Oh my gosh. No. The first thing they declared was their allegiance and loyalty to the King of Great Britain, King George III. Then they discussed that they felt it was not fair for Great Britain to tax them when they had no representation in the British law-making group called Parliament. That's right, no taxation without representation. The only people in Great Britain who did not have representation in Parliament or a say in the laws that were made were servants, children, and women. How dare Parliament compare these gentlemen with such lowlifes as children? That was sarcasm. Sorry. Also, the Stamp Act Congress declared that only local legislatures, the colonial lawmaking groups, had the right to tax colonists. More colonists began to speak out against the tax. One group called the Sons of Liberty decided to organize a boycott of British goods. That's right, they would refuse to buy British goods until Great Britain took back that Stamp Act. But that's not all the Sons of Liberty organized. They also carried out attacks on custom houses and tax collectors. Some of these attacks were very cruel. After the home of Massachusetts Governor Thomas Hutchinson was attacked, Great Britain decided it was time. And can you guess what the mighty British decided it was time to do? That's right, repeal the tax. War! How could they do such a thing? Wait. Repealed, like canceled. Like the colonists don't have to pay the tax anymore? That's right. Oh, jolly good. Oh, well then, have a nice day. And, sorry about the mess. The British wanted to make sure the colonists didn't get things twisted. The Declaratory Act of 1766 declared or stated clearly that even though the Stamp Act had been repealed, Great Britain was still the mother country, and therefore had the right to tax or pass any law over its colonies. Just as the Declaratory Act had warned, Great Britain and Parliament did, in fact, placed more taxes on British colonists in America. The Townsend Acts of 1767 placed taxes on goods like glass, lead, paint, paper, and tea. It must have felt like everything in the entire town was taxed. Get it? Townsend Acts? Everything in the town? Okay. Anyway, sorry. The Townsend Acts once again caused some of the colonists to lose it. Some protests were violent, while some were more organized. Yes, here comes another boycott. Women in the colonies created the Daughters of Liberty. This group supported the boycott of British goods by holding spinning bees, where they would spin cloth to replace the cloth and clothing that was no longer being purchased from Great Britain. I guess you could say the Daughters of Liberty were a spin-off from the Sons of Liberty. Ouch. After losing money again, Great Britain decided it was time for war. How could they do such a thing? No. A time to repeal or cancel all of the taxes placed on the colonists by the Townsend Acts. All, of course, except one, the tax on tea. You know, these American colonists love their tea. After all, they are British, and no one British would ever boycott tea. I mean, what on earth could ever replace this hot and caffeinated, delightful drink? War! How could they do such a thing?